But it seems like there's an awful lot of stock on Winston Wright and obviously Kentron Portier. But if you think about, and for those watching the show on Warchant TV, you can see the poll is up there, and you see the percentages and who got what votes.
And the question is about who is going to be the third most important receiver. It's not about who's got the third most catches or the third most yards, because we envision that Florida State will have quite a bit of garbage time this year. So you could have something that's a little bit more deceiving. And it's the third most important wide receivers. So that eliminates a Jaheim Bell or a Morlock or a Biscuit or even Lawrence Toafili. You might see some of those guys actually higher in the rankings in terms of catches and yards and big plays made on a third down. But specific to the receiving room, because now that you have Keon Coleman, he plays a certain position at wide receiver, and Johnny, of course, plays outside as well.
Yeah, so that was going to be where I went, and I'm glad you set it up that way. That's exactly what I was thinking when I was thinking about the wide receiver room. And I was thinking, well, okay, Johnny Wilson's split out wide. Keon Coleman's going to be split out wide. You need to be, if you're voting on the impact of a third receiver, you're going to vote a slot guy. One would think, right? And so I know that people think Winston Wright is going to be that guy. And by the way, Kentron Portier is going to matter. He's going to have a good year, I think. He did take real steps forward, but he's on the outside. He's a possession guy. He's a big receiver, just like Johnny's a big receiver, and Keon Coleman's a big receiver. But they're all out there out wide. So I'm looking more inside. And here's the thing: I don't doubt that Winston Wright will, get back to some kind of form, to where he looks to be a semblance of what he was at West Virginia, where he was so productive and was really their guy, the most dependable receiver they had. And, that's why we were so excited when we got him, is he was a proven entity in the Power Five and a guy that you thought could really do some good things for you. And tragically, through no fault of his own, you have a car accident and some devastating injuries and surgeries that follow. The first big story there is that he's okay. That's what you really care about. He's okay. The next big story is that, okay, well, he's going to have surgery. What's that mean for his season? Well, it turned out it meant that he couldn't play last year and spent the entirety of the last season rehabbing and getting back to full strength and finding out what range of motion he had and what he could still do. And spring was the first time that he would have an opportunity to truly go live and to maybe showcase that he's all the way back. And I think probably by design, Tom, he was not able to showcase that he was all the way back. There's no doubt that his impact in the spring was minimal. There were not days where we walked away from practice saying, boy, Winston Wright's looking like he's rounding into form. That was never uttered. There was never a moment like that. He ran full speed. He cut. He was in pads. There were times that you thought, okay, well, that's a good sign, real good sign, especially given the tragedy of a car accident that strips your ability to play football. But I guess this is a long-winded way of me saying I got to wait and see it before I believe it. I hate to be this kind of pessimist, but I would rather go with Vendravius Jacobs. Even though he's a freshman, he was silky smooth in the spring. He was uber productive, far more impactful day-to-day in spring than Winston Wright was. It wasn't even close.
You're doing the math on, will the switch flip? Because if it does, Winston Wright, climbs to the top of the leaderboard, and it's not even close in terms of slot receiver. But this is a tough one. This is a tough one to me, because this offense could be so multiple that, you could line up receivers in weird spots. The tight ends, of course, line up all over the field in Norvell's offense. I mean, if you wanted to go trips to the left, who lines up where in that particular circumstance? You could go a trips look to your left, then you got Marquiston on the end of the line on the right, and you could see where there's a zone read option. Like, there's all kinds of weird formations, and I don't know who the player is going to be with each set. And Mike Norvell is multiple enough to keep you on your toes. That's what we love about him. But I think if you're just going plainly by a standard operating formation in a 3 or 4 wide set, you need a slot guy, which means that Ja'Kai Douglas is on the short list with Winston Wright, with Vandrevius Jacobs, and then perhaps Darion, who's a larger body but has shown in very limited live game reps that he can line up kind of anywhere and his skill set translates anywhere. But one of the wild cards to me would be Deuce Spann. Deuce Spann didn't have an awful camp.
No, he
Deuce
had a good
Spann
camp
didn't
for
have
him. He had a good camp. The bottom line is when Deuce Spann got here, he was as raw as a receiver could be. He was also beyond athletic. He was a gifted gazelle. I mean, that's a guy that when you look at him, you think, holy moly, if the light bulb goes off for him, he could end up being better than all of them. I mean, that sounds crazy, but we're talking extremes. His speed and size and length, and I mean, he's ridiculous. He also doesn't know how to play receiver. So,
it's gotten better though.
It's gotten a lot better.
You've seen the development from a kid who doesn't know how to place his hands and receive the ball. Rather, it's almost like he was swatting at the football rather than trying to receive it and catch it with touch. And that's now a normal thing for Deuce. I remember in the stadium practice, in addition to a couple of standard practices, where in the one-on-ones, he started to make a couple of guys in the secondary look foolish with his release off the line, which shows more of a comfort. You're not thinking about the steps you're taking. You're just playing the position, and you're showing your explosiveness. He also isn't afraid to block either, which I think is important. If you can get a slot receiver who also can profile as a blocker, that would be actually the argument for Kentron to play large in the slot. It's not like it's impossible to do so. Think about the Bruce Arians offense and what Hines Ward was and what Chris Godwin was. And, those guys weren't lined up outside all the time. And yet they could be integral parts of the offense. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean in today's day and age of football that your slot guy has to be tiny. It's just if you look at the skill sets of Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, assuming those two are going to be your stalwarts on the outside, and the production suggests as much, what's different? How do you create variety on the field? And that's where you need a little guy. And I would give Ja'Kai Douglas a fighting chance in that situation because, again, if you've got Jaheim Bell on the field as well, that means Ja'Kai is going to be going against your fourth or fifth best cover corner or safety. And that dude with those quicks, I mean, you're going to win that battle. It's just if you see the green check, I agree with you. Dre Jacobs already looked polished. It reminded me of Rashad Green, just how professional, quote unquote, he looked immediately and in place. It didn't seem like he was a fish out of water. Hakeem Williams was a fish out of water for the first half of camp. Dre was not.
So think about this. When we talk about the wide receiver room, and it's hard not to get giddy, maybe not in the same way that we did about offensive line, where the offensive line went from the reason you're losing games to maybe one of the reasons you're going to win games. We've seen a seismic shift. But when you pull that graphic back up again for 1 second. I want to do this. So again, not talking about this upcoming season, but just looking at how they have flipped this room. You realize that Destin Hill, we saw him now. We know he's a real person and he's on campus. And when you look at him, he looks the part, right? He's not tiny. He's athletic. Well, obviously he's a burner. He's all these things. Now, I don't know how quickly he can get back into football and be polished because it's been 2 years. But, he's a young kid with a lot of talent. So you think about Hakeem Williams, Destin Hill, Deuce Spann, the continued development of Kentron Portier. You think about I said Hakeem Williams, right? Think about what you have now, and you got an incoming freshman coming in too.
Yeah, Goldie Lawrence, who's 6'2", 190.
Yeah. So you really now, when we start projecting outward after this year we know the guys we think are, I know we already mentioned him, but Vandrevius Jacobs is a freshman. So here you go. I mean, you're starting to set yourself up now with an opportunity to have height and speed and a route running Jesse and Jacobs. You got a lot of guys now that are. Hakeem Williams is a freak athletically when you look at how big and strong he is. They're gonna have receivers set up now for the next 2 and 3 years. And I just want to point out while we're having that conversation about, who's going to impact, be the third guy, all that other stuff. It's fun to have these conversations because those names, they come one after the other. And you start going, oh, that's right. They got another one and another one and another one.
Well, the question also is they going to rotate receivers? And this is at the bottom of the screen here on Warchant TV. You're seeing a few comments from guys like Matty B. Noel, Mathis Jones, and Vinny Gambini, folks who are subscribers to Warchant.com, the biggest FSU community on the web. And you could see the basic ideas of Kentron being the safe bet or Winston Wright. This is actually an important part of the function here. I think about the most important wide receiver. Winston Wright was a first down machine at West Virginia. It's 3rd and 6. You might have 4 catches in a game for 27 yards, but if 3 of them move the chains on 3rd down, that is
vital.
Huge. That is vital to the game. And who could be that player? I felt like Pokey Wilson was that guy last year, but Winston Wright could be that particular player. The thing is, remember in the Oklahoma game in the bowl, and I wonder if this was more about a bowl game than anything else, but they rotated a ton of wide receivers in the first half.
Yeah.
Actually, too many for my liking. You can't get in a rhythm of the game. I don't like that very much. I don't think you bring in Keon Coleman to rotate with Kentron at a 50-50 clip or even a 60-40 clip. But it's something to keep an eye on for this offense this year is, are they going to be about fewer reps and more explosive reps, and they're just going to go up and down the line? Or are they going to pick their horses and then ride them for the 2 or 3 quarters when you're trying to assert yourself, and then hopefully in most of these games be out of touch in the 4th quarter and you can rotate some guys in? I don't know the answer to that. I know what I like to see, but Coach Norvell does rotate guys an awful lot on offense.